Hello, my name is Hugo, and this is Hugo's Desk. The other day, I sat down with Allan McKay. He invited me to his podcast. I was really honored by that invitation, and we had a blast. We had a wonderful time. I recorded the video, so you can watch it here. We had a wonderful time talking about things that normally don't get talked about that many times on my videos or even on podcasts, and which is a shame. We talked a lot about the business of visual effects. We talked about inspiration. We talked about our past, of how we became visual effects artists, and also especially how people need to become a bit better at business, of how they pick their rates and if they should have an agent or not, and how do they deal with competition, and how do they deal with rates of other people, and how do they discover the rates that they should be charging, if they should even be charging more or less. It was a great talk, and I really enjoyed it. And I know it's not as typical conversation that you usually have on a visual effects podcast, but don't worry, because me and Allan already discussed that we're going to do part 2, so we're going to have a sequel for this podcast. But yeah, I had a wonderful time, and I think the podcast was great. And I was, again, like I said, very honored to be invited. If you want to check out this podcast, please go to allanmckay.com, or you can, of course, find his podcast on iTunes and on every place where usually podcasts are found. He's had some wonderful guests over the years. It's a really great resource. So go and visit his website and check out and go and support him in the wonderful work he does for the community in general. In the meantime, don't forget that if you are one of my Patreons, don't forget that the credits will be at the end of the video, so you can check up your name there. And I would, of course, like to thank all my Patreons for supporting my channel and supporting this video. If you would like to support the channel, of course, don't forget you can join the Patreon and join our community. There's a lot of perks there. Or you can become a member of the Hugo's Desk YouTube channel as well. There's also a membership as well with some perks as well. If you don't want to join, that's fine too. It's all free as well. Only if you want to support the channel. So without further ado, let's just check out the video, and hope you've enjoyed it as much as I did. And I'll see you next time.
Do you want to dive right in?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Awesome. All right, brother. So do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Hugo Guerra, and don't try to pronounce my name. No one ever does that. It's fine. So I'm a director and a visual effects supervisor. I have worked for about 20 years now. I've worked in a lot of different places. A lot of people that would be listening to this, they know me already. But just to very, very briefly, I have worked at the mill for many years as a head of compositing there. I've worked at Nexus for many years as a senior compositor. I've worked for the BBC. I've worked for Ubisoft. More recently, I've worked as a VFX Sup for Sony San Diego, and also Sony PlayStation London. And right now, I am currently booked at Rebellion Studios. So I'm working there as a director, doing mocap shoots and doing trailers and cinematics with them. So that's kind of one side of my life, which is work. And then the other side of my life is like teaching and academic, which doesn't happen that often now with COVID-19. But I used to go to a lot of universities to teach, and I do a lot of podcasts, I do a lot of videos, I do a lot of tutorials. I have my own YouTube channel called Hugo's Desk. So I have kind of like a second life of teaching, and then my first life is working. Often they intercept, a lot of times I end up using the stuff I've done in my tutorials. So when I get permission from my clients. But yeah, that's kind of, not going to spend much more time. There's a lot more to say. Oh, yeah, I'm Portuguese, by the way. So I'm from Portugal. Cool. But I live in London. I work in London, and I've been in London for like 15 years. No, for 14 years. Yeah, 14 years. So yeah, that's a bit about me. Yeah.
That's cool. And I guess like for you, one of the questions I always ask, just because I'm always fascinated, like, did you always want to be an artist growing up, or is it something that you discovered later on?
Yeah, so before I even answer, Allan, I just wanted to take this opportunity real quick to just say thank you so much for inviting me to this podcast. I'm a big fan of your work. I'm a big fan of your podcast as well. And I cannot be understated how much you've contributed to this community, and I'm really, really happy that you invited me, and yeah, just keep doing what you do, man, because it's great. It's really fantastic work. Just wanted to let you know, and also the audience as well. I'm sure everyone agrees with me as well.
I'm sure there's one or two who are like, no, screw that guy, but I'll keep listening.
Oh, yeah. It's probably the same guy that always, whenever I publish a video on YouTube, 5 seconds later, I have one dislike.
Yeah. Well, first of all, to say like thank you, I'm honored, man. Like I really appreciate it, and yeah, like I said before we started, like I think this is way overdue. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. And yeah, I'll just comment on that because I think there's always like 2 dislikes that I'll get like on any videos I put on YouTube. But the thing is that other people will comment and be like, "How could anyone dislike this?" And the thing is, I don't mention it, but I'm like, no, like it's not. I don't see it as like these people disliking the video. I think it's the same 2 people, and I'm like, they're just showing up to say hi. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So yeah, it's pretty funny when you get like the same metric every single time. It's like, no, it's the same 2 people who are like, I hate you, but I'm gonna watch your video.
I'm gonna watch it anyway. I know. No, anyway, to answer your question, I guess I wasn't when I was young. Like I've always was fascinated by both video games and film. I've always been like that, and obviously I wasn't really when I was young. I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm gonna be a composer. I didn't even know what that was. But I knew I wanted to work in something in film or something in visual effects because I was fascinated, even so young, by all these amazing films that we watched when we were younger. I'm like 42 now, and so for me, Terminator and Jurassic Park, all the usual suspects. I was just fascinated by this industrial light and magic company that everyone talked about, that no one else. It was so mystical, and of course video games. I've been playing video games since I'm 6. I started with like a Sinclair and then an Amiga and an Amstrad. Like I've always played games. So those kind of things have always been part of my life. And I think it all kind of changed with when I finally got a video camera. When I was like a teenager, my mother, like she really worked really hard to give me a camera. Cameras were not cheap back then. So I got like a Video 8 camera, a really crappy Sony video camera that was black and white on the viewfinder and everything was automated, like these Video 8 cameras. But I thought it was amazing. I did all sorts of shorts with my friends, and I ended up doing like a lot of short films, a lot of really stupid things that some of them I still have, others I've lost, But that's kind of like when I started. I was so fascinated by this camera, and I then bought a second VCR, so I was like connecting VCR to VCR, doing editing with cutting, like VCR to VCR.
Yeah.
And then I ended up like getting some more money. Then I bought like a little mixer that I could fade in shots, And then only later on, I finally got a computer when I was only because coming from Portugal, didn't have a lot of money. I'll be frank, like I hadn't really had any money to buy a proper computer, so I only managed to get a computer. Because my mother saved up a lot of money, and bless her that she gave me one. And so that was my first computer was like in 98, that was quite late in my life, but I couldn't get one before. That was like a Pentium 2 machine, with like a Matrox video card that I can capture some stuff. That's kind of how it started. I was fascinated by Premiere and by After Effects. Back then it was like After Effects 2 and Premiere 1.5. And I was just like messing around with. I didn't know anything about it. I was like clicking on stuff basically and just like brute forcing myself through it. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. You don't even know what you're doing. You're just touching, and then, this does that.
First time I was doing 3D, like, because no one taught me this stuff. So like, when I got into like the keyframer in 3 Studio DOS, like I'm just moving this like helicopter that came with it around, and I don't really, it's moving around the screen, but I had no idea what it was. And keyframing is such a simple concept now, but at the time it's like I didn't understand any of this, and it's like me walking down the street one day, it just kind of clicked, and I'm like, oh, I think I get it now, and then I could animate, So it's just the struggles that we have that everyone else is like, YouTube, like, how does this work?
I know, it's so funny, isn't it? Like, because like there was nothing, like we couldn't. I know people hear this all the time on podcasts. Oh, there was nothing on your time, but there was literally nothing. I mean, come on. Mm-hmm. I'm from Portugal. I'll be very honest, and I hope Adobe is not listening to this, but I had a cracked version of Premiere. I didn't have a Premiere version because I was a teenager. How could I have bought Premiere? I had like the demo version that came with the Matrox card, of course, but there was no help file. There was just like a burned CD, like there was nothing for me to really glance. And only years later, I managed to like actually buy a Matrox R2000 that actually brought Premiere 2, and then it had like a thick manual. I could like look through it and read it, and how those big machine, like especially After Effects 2 and 3, they had huge manuals. They had like discs with like tutorials and a whole
bookshelf.
Exactly,
like, this is a tree that was sacrificed so I could learn.
So I kind of learned that way. I read the manuals back to forward. I tested stuff, trial and error. Yeah, and then kind of moved on. After Effects became my thing, like I became pretty good at it, I must say. I don't want to gloat, but I was very good at it. I got a lot of jobs from it, especially in Portugal and then in Sweden as well. I was an After Effects artist for a long time in Sweden and in Portugal, and Nuke was just then it was Fusion, and then it was Shake, and then it was Nuke. So it was kind of like basically just transferring my knowledge from one to the other and to the other. And I'm sure I'll just transfer it to the next one that will show up, which will most likely be called, I don't know, like Fandango 2000 or whatever it will be called. Something will come. I don't get attached to softwares that much. Like people get attached to softwares too much, I think, but I just get attached to the way you do it, like the techniques and the artistry behind it. I must say I'm a very artistic-driven composer and artist in VFX Sup. I'm not very technical at all. Like I'm not very, I don't know code, I don't know Python, I don't know any of that. I'm very much like I think that's because of my background, because I have an arts degree. Yeah, I forgot about that actually. So when I was young, remember when I said I had a video camera and everything? You could, and my dream was like, oh, I want to work either at ILM or the Mill or one of these places. And for you to work on those companies back then and before the year 2000, like in 95, 96, 97, you had to have an art degree. Like you would go to their website, their horrible website that you would look up on Alta Vista, and then it would say you have to have an art degree. And that's what I did. I went to art school. I did a 5-year degree on fine arts, where I learned how to draw, how to paint, how to do sculpting, how to do, and during that time there was also a lot of video art classes, where we would learn to film and learn to edit as well, and learn a lot about movies and cinema and the history of cinema, and so I think that's why I have such that artistic side of it, because it was always at that school that I learned all those things, and we never really had any technical side, So I think that's why.
No, that's cool. And for you, like, what was your experience like with the degree? Did you learn a lot?
Well, back then I did, and I thought it was going to be really helpful and everything. I feel like it was important because it gave me access to things. I had really good teachers, and they gave me access to directors I've never heard of, films that I've never would have looked for myself because I couldn't find them. It gave me access to literature that I wouldn't thought through. It gave me access to like color theory and composition and certain DOPs, because some of these teachers became influential, because they had a bunch of VHS tapes with these films, and they had a bunch of books, and they would loan to the students. So I think from that sense, this happened between the age of like 16 to 20 or something. During that age, it became really influential and really marked my life by learning these really cool artists. Learning a lot about David Cronenberg, learning a lot about David Fincher, David Lynch. Like Stanley Kubrick, of course. Fellini, Angela. All these directors became like important for me when I started learning a lot about the movie business when I was at the art school. And so I don't think they've taught me anything that I really use day to day. I don't think so.
Exposed you to a lot.
Yeah, they just exposed me to a lot of inspiration that I think I would not have known if I wouldn't have been at the School of Arts, and also sharing with other artists and having friends that were artists, and also like having relationships with other fellow artists. And I think for me, that's the major. I don't know if it is like that these days, of course, because now it's been like 30 years. But for me, that's the main thing that for me happens on university. You have this melting pot of culture, and especially because we had a lot of foreigner students as well on the school, because of Europe, because of the Erasmus program, which was a program that would swap students all over Europe. So for me, it's the inspirational side. Technically, I didn't learn anything I use now. No, of course not. Like nothing. Like I hardly draw anymore. I hardly paint anymore. I don't really sculpt anymore. All the video art stuff I don't really use, because we're using like video to video Betamax cameras and things like that, So, but I think that's why I always kind of tell my students, you should go and at least go to school and at least learn something, at least talk with other people from a more artistic community, so that you can get some inspiration and some bases when you're young, because that will kind of form your taste. Because I think if anything, for me, like working in this industry, you do have to have good references and good taste and know how an image is pretty, you know, and beautiful and good. And I think sometimes people forget that. They get a bit too obsessed with the clicking, you know, the clicking in the software. And they forget about what makes an image pretty and beautiful. Why does this specific frame from, you know, like from Fellini, why does it look beautiful? Because this happened there, and the composition was like this, and the lighting was like that, and there was choices made to the storytelling, and I think people often forget those things. You know, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much already. I'm sorry about that.
Dude, it's fine. It's totally fine. No, I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's also a lot of people, they want to rush the results. They kind of want, like, man, who was it? It was someone contacted me. They're like a junior, and they're like, "Yeah, what do I need to do to become a VFX supervisor in the next year?" Something like that. But the reason I mention is just because I think that there's so much experience to learn on the ground level in terms of timing, in terms of training your eye, color theory, composition. You know, those are more the fundamentals that you either need to already know or adapt along the way. But all of these things, that's the stuff that's going to stick with you the rest of your life. When the software changes from, you know, Fusion to Shake to Nuke to Fandango 3000 or whatever it's going to be. And so, you know, I think that most people just need to slow down and kind of learn that stuff. And I feel like the artists that I've worked with who I feel are a bit weaker in a lot of areas later on, it's because they missed out on those really kind of core foundation needed earlier on.
And I'm obviously, I'm not advocating that everyone should go to university. Of course not. You know, like I went to university because, fortunately for me, you know, Portugal has free university. You know, anyone can go to university. It's free. No one pays anything. So the state pays for it. So I can't, of course, advise people in Britain to do that, because that's like £50,000 here, you know. So obviously, if you're in France or if you're in Portugal, if you're in Italy, you should take advantage of that system, because most of European countries like that do have free education, and I think you should really take advantage of it because it's free. You know, like what are you going to lose? You know, you're not going to lose anything. There's no loans that you have to pay. There's nothing that you have to pay. You're just going to learn. Even if you just dive in and go away, you can just do a few years and leave. You don't need to finish it. But I think it's so important to learn other things, and people just keep forgetting. I get the same questions all the time, Allan, as well, just like you. How do I become, I've seen you work a lot on VFX Sup. How do I become a VFX Sup? And I always get to the same thing. I don't really know as well how do you get there, but definitely you'll get there by working like a decade at least on it. You know, you can't just become one. People ask me all the time, why don't you do a VFX supervisor course? And I'm like, I can't do that, because unless we're going to all go to a set, you know, unless we all go to the set together as a group, like a school trip, you'll never understand what it is to be on set, you know.
Plus, sorry, I'll just quickly jump in there and say that I also think that, like, for most people, maybe it's the title, you know, it's kind of like being CEO or something else. But like, I think swooping on set is fun, but it isn't, like, compared to doing what you do while you're passionate about doing it. I'm kind of jaded. I hate everything now, but
I'm the same. Don't worry. I'm the same.
Yeah, like most people wouldn't enjoy essentially like begging and pleading for like 5 minutes to go and measure some stuff. Whereas going and doing some explosions or, you know, finishing a shot, like doing something that's way more interesting, at least at the time. Like, you know, these days I'm not so interested in being on the box, but yeah, I think most people, they were to jump to that end of things. First of all, it's basically applying all the experience that you've had your entire career to be able to make decisions on the fly. But it's also not really that fun. Like, most of the time you're sitting in a spreadsheet, like trying to figure out like where you can borrow some money, you know? So you know, I think
it's the glamour. That's the thing. It's all this glamour which is largely exaggerated. And I think, I have also met people that understand that, and again, I'm not gonna become a senior. I just want to work and be this and do animation and do modeling or do whatever, and they stick with it for like 10 years, 15 years, and they become amazing at it, and that's what they want to do. They don't want to go any deeper, you know. But yeah, it's interesting how people have really the wrong idea of what this is, I think. It's not glamorous at all. Like, it sucks a lot of times. Man, I've been on set for like 15 hours in a row.
Oh, dude.
Cold, like on
later.
rain with snow. I mean, like people shouting at you, people changing their fucking minds, and like, I'm sorry, I've cursed. I'm sorry about that. You know,
You told me before you listened to the podcast. So.
No, I did, but
It's a prerequisite.
I try not to curse on my YouTube channel, so I'm used to that. At least I try. On Twitch is a bit more difficult, but I just feel like people really have the wrong idea. It's not. I think a lot of people confuse directing and working as a VFX sup, or even working in VFX, and it's they kind of have this idea that if they're going to work on a film as a composer, for example, they think they'll have any creative input on anything, and they won't. Like, that's kind of why I left the mill. I left the mill because I was fed up of not having input, and I'm a creative person. I want to have input, so I kind of traded a really good career I had there. I was a VFX sup at the mill, like one of the biggest world companies in commercials. I was climbing the ladder in the company. I was a senior, then I became a head of department, then I became a sup. I was probably going to become a creative director at some point if I would stay there. I was there for 6 years, 5-6 years. But I kind of traded that for my own company, smaller. I just do smaller projects, of course, smaller budgets, but they're my projects. I create them, I do my storyboards, I do my scripts, and I work my way into the jobs, and I try to select the jobs that talk to me a bit. And of course, they're smaller. Of course, I will never go back to winning VFX, VES awards. I will never go back and winning British Arrows. I will never go back to those jobs, because those jobs are inside these companies that get all the big clients. But I'm so much more happy now, Allan. That's the thing. I'm so much more happy now than I was miserable at the mill. So it's.
Well, I think it's the metric. Like, we all, like, because you mentioned earlier ILM and the mill being like this glorified thing, and I think that we all want to go there because it's like that's kind of the pinnacle, or maybe that's the metric of success or whatever. But ultimately, like, what do you want to enjoy? And like, I'll just quickly say, like, I was chatting with Beeple, if you know him on Instagram and everything. Yeah. He does a lot of daily art. And that was something we talked a lot about, was just, I think most people think that they're going to be an artist. And I get into arguments sometimes with people about the fact that they think that if clients come back and give them feedback, it's like, well, they should just trust in my creative ability. It's like, no, you're being hired. Like, that's why I always dumb it down to, like, if you want me to paint a house yellow and pink, like really ugly colors, like, that's your prerogative. Like, you're hiring me to do that. If I want to do my own stuff, I'll go do my own stuff. Yeah, exactly. And I think that most people have that misunderstanding that
it's a service, and they do. They definitely have that misunderstanding, and they get very afflicted by their integrity, their artistic integrity. And I completely understand that, because I've been there where clients have said stupid things, and they've asked for stupid requests, but they're paying. So it's like, okay, well, sure, we're going to try that, and we'll show it to you. And I think as much, I especially think I'm really, I think you do an amazing job on that front, trying to explain to people how business works, because a lot of us are terrible businessmen. Like, that's one of the biggest issues. And I really feel you've done such a big work on the community on that side of things, on branding, on business, on dealing with clients, whenever you send your emails, whenever you send your all your comment, like, it's really good information. And I feel like people forget that side of how to deal with changes, how to deal with feedback, how to deal with budgets, how to deal with contracts, which is unfortunately not glamorous at all, but it's part of this job as well. And it's really important. It's so important. I don't want to take over the conversation. I'll be brief until you talk, but I will never forget, years ago, I was on a festival presenting at the Trojan Horse Festival, the Portuguese Trojan Horse. I was presenting there on the second year they were running. And they had, right after my presentation, it was Syd Mead, unfortunately he just died, passed away a few, but I met him before backstage. And I talked a bit with him while I was waiting for me to present, and then he was presenting. He was the head. He was the last presenter, and he was amazing. I had a long chat with him, and I'll never forget one thing he told me. He told me that the secret for his success, because he was quite successful. He had an agent on the stage with him, and he was, not a billionaire, but he was wealthy. He had a good career. He had good money, and he just told me that it was very simple for him. On the beginning of his career, he was doing concept art, and he was doing all those things, for Alien and for 2010 and all those things, and he was getting peanuts. The moment that he got an agent and got someone to deal with the business side, because he was terrible at that, that was the moment that everything turned around. That was the moment where he started managing to get deals where his art, if they put it on a book, he gets royalties. If his art is used on a toy, he gets royalties. To a point that he gets royalties if there's like a toy of a Blade Runner car, So he managed to negotiate with these companies. Okay, I'll do that art, but I want to cut on it. Otherwise, I'll do somewhere else. And even had lawsuits and everything with other companies where he was talking about, okay, stole one of my designs that they saw in my illustration, so I sue them, and then they did a deal. And I feel a lot of times that we are to blame a lot of times as artists, because we don't think like he was thinking. He was thinking, of course, as an artist, because he's an amazing artist, but he thought, okay, I suck at business. I'm going to get someone to do it for me. And obviously that person is getting, I don't know how much, but he's probably getting 15% or 10% or 12% or whatever he's getting. But it's so worth it, isn't it, if you think about it? Because he's dealing with all that stuff. He deals with the little nitty gritty of the contract. He deals with the little gritty thing of the money. And this happened this was like 8 years ago. I will never forget this conversation because it really opened my eyes. I was like, shit, you're right. Like, you're so right. We are terrible at royalties. We are terrible at this. We suck. Yes. Even the music industry is better than us at this. Like, we really suck at this,
No, 100%. I think it's so critical. I think that most artists, I think there's also just that allergic reaction. We think that, I'm an artist, and we kind of put ourselves into this kind of category of I'm creative and business is the guy in the suit, and I'm not that person. We kind of self-identify as the artist. And I think that really it's just learning the software and focusing so much and clicking that button. It's really, we're focused on the service, but we're not thinking at all about behind the scenes. We still need to do all these other things. And I had a sit down, it's probably 7 years ago, with a big agency in LA. They were looking at representing me, and I was kind of picking their brain a lot about this. And the more they got into it, I was like, I totally see the value. I forget whether I think it ranges between 10 to 20% that they'll take.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, they can work that into the negotiations, that they'll bump it up. And I think it's 10%. And the main thing was that the more I thought about it, it's just I think this is really valuable for certain people when they're kind of more, let's say, mid-level. But I do think when you get to a certain point, as long as you are comfortable saying, well, this is my standard, negotiating package of what I want and everything else. VFX is a little bit different.
Yeah.
You still negotiate a lot, but
I think the thing with this, Allan, is that, just like Syd said, I think it's because he was so uncomfortable and so not on ease to do that. And you are a good speaker, you know how to talk with people, you know how to communicate with your clients. That is why you have so much success with your clients. And not everyone is like that. A lot of people are terrible at communicating. They're terrible at talking. And I think that is the issue. A lot of times they get put in really bad situations because they didn't have, they didn't have really the courage to talk about, oh, what is this point of my contract? Or, oh, what is this part? Can I negotiate this part? A lot of times you can negotiate it, but unfortunately, I think a lot of us are so shy on that side, and I think it's a shame. I guess if people would more support each other, they probably would help each other more, and if they were a bit more open to those kind of things. But I feel like not everyone needs an agent. Of course not. I think some people know exactly what they're doing, and they are good at business, and they are good at talking, and they have everything sorted out in terms of how they're going to do the contract and how they're going to do their rates. But I really feel that a lot of people need that help. They need help, with that. So. Yeah,
I agree. Because all I was going to say is that there are downsides to having an agent, because that's how they make their money. And when you try to leave an agent, like I've got some friends who got in like vicious lawsuits over that because essentially they see you as their, as their bread money. So
Of course.
they're going to fight tooth and nail,
To
like they
get,
did
yeah.
for you,
Yeah,
against
yeah.
you to try and force you to pay up.
Of
But
course,
yeah,
I
I
know.
agree.
There's no perfect solution. There isn't. I mean, I'll be honest. I don't have an agent, but I do have. I am very tough on my negotiation. I'm very tough. I walked away from a lot of jobs because of that, and I think you also have to kind of learn that sometimes you can walk away. And if you're doing something that doesn't make sense and it sounds like shit, this is bullshit and it's not going to work out. And I have also met a lot of people and even companies that are afraid of walking away and they get into real trouble when they don't walk away.
I think the secret is to pay attention every time you get burned, and
Yeah.
that's the sucky thing is to learn that way. But like, there's certain people I'm kind of coaching on the business side, and the more that they run into mistakes, it's like, well, you already had that mistake 6 months ago. Like, why didn't you learn from that? Because the more you get burned, the more you can take a note of that, and it helps you because that's the question that you ask the next time around, or that's the thing that you bring up is like, well, what if we run into this situation?
Yeah.
And that way, it's not necessarily negotiating; it's literally just asking questions, and then you
Yeah.
can make up your mind about, okay, this sounds like it's going to be bad and I need to walk away, or now that I've brought this stuff up, we've addressed it and we can move forward. It's the same way if you don't mention money at first and then it becomes really awkward later on because you're like, oh, well, by the way, how much are you getting paid on this job, or something really
Yeah.
like crucial that somehow you're like, well, I didn't want to talk about it. They didn't bring it up.
Yeah.
And that's when they could say like, I thought this was free, or 100 other things could go wrong.
Yeah.
But for you, like, what would be what are some of the things that you tend to negotiate, or not necessarily what you negotiate, because I don't want to pry into that, but like, what are some tactics or advice you give to people for how to negotiate?
Well, I think the first thing, just like what you just said, because that only happened to me once, where I didn't talk right away. That only happened to me once, and I was only burned once about that.
You learn your lesson. And,
Exactly. I learned a lesson. I did exactly what you said. That happened a long time to me, and I was doing a job in Portugal, and I didn't talk right away about the money. And then, yes, it turned out the guy thought it was going to be free, So, and I was already starting the job already, so I was already wasting my time anyway on the job. I ended up walking away, but the guy was pissed, and he said he was going to talk to everyone that he knows about me, but nothing happened. But anyway.
Sorry, I just want to interrupt once, just really quick, and say that I got told that when I first moved to LA, I worked for this like 2-bit really bad company. I was just thinking about them the other day, and there was someone there after I asked to be paid normal rates, whatever, instead of being taken advantage of. I was told, you'll never work in Hollywood again. It's just like one of those lines that I'm like, wow, like people actually say that outside the movies. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
It's funny, isn't it? Because now you've worked so much on Hollywood, it's just so
Well,
ridiculous.
I was just thinking that those guys are working.
Anyway, I think that's the first advice. You need to talk about it right away. And you need to know who in the company is the person to talk about it, because a lot of times I'm dealing with someone that doesn't know anything about that either. So, if you're dealing with like a junior producer, if you're dealing with an executive producer or a line producer, they don't know anything about the money of the company, So you need to like find who does and who you can talk to. Generally, as someone on finance, it's usually someone higher up on the production that deals with contracts. You just have to find their email and then start talking with that person. And often, from experience, it's nicer if it's a different person. I like that, because then it's a different thing from the job, and it kind of separates it from the dramatic side of the job and then the dramatic side of the money. And in terms of advice, I would say that people really have to charge what they have to charge. And I feel like a lot of people don't charge because they're so afraid of losing the job. And it's almost like they would do the typical mistake of sending an email saying, let me just say out loud, okay, I'm doing a compositing job, and let's say we say 300 pounds a day. So they write on the email, I want 300 pounds a day. And then right after the next line, they say, but I'm fine if we have less, or I can negotiate. It's not a problem. They already feel bad because they said 300, And I think that's the problem. I think people need to stick with their guns. So you need to like research your market, find out how much do people get paid on your area or your country, and it's easy to find out. You can either contact a union and they can help you, or you can contact friends that that work on the industry. You can contact people directly on LinkedIn if they are willing to talk to you. Like, there's always ways of doing it, I think, for you to find out. And then once you establish, okay, this is how much they usually do. And obviously, talking more to the past. Now, these days, there are online information about that. I think
that's really too accurate, though.
Yeah, it isn't. You're right. It is not very accurate. But I think, yes, it's very hard to find that information online, and sometimes it's not real. So if you cannot find accurate information of how much you get paid, I think the only alternative you have is to really think hard of how much money you need to live, how much money you need to do a job that will take you a long time and will require. And when you think how much money you need for a job, you need to think about not just about the hours that you spend, but also the amount of investment that you have taken to get to this place, as well. So because you need to pay back all those long hours of learning and all those long hours of actually researching to know this effect, or all those long hours all those weekends that you took to learn certain things on Houdini or certain things on Nuke, So you kind of have to think about as, okay, how much money do I need for rent? How much money do I need for food? How much money do I need to research? How much money do I need for some entertainment? And then you go to that level, to that value, and then you kind of think, okay, now I'm going to put maybe something on top for profit so that I can invest on something else. Let's say 40% on top or 50% on top, or maybe you can go even higher if you can. And then stick with that gun. And if you feel comfortable with that value and you think, okay, I can live with this value, I can also have a future with this value, I can put some money on the side, I can also invest on my equipment, and then I can ask them. And my experience is that usually that value is usually it's not as much as you think it is. And I've had a lot of clients where I learned the hard way, where I gave them a value and I told them, okay, 400 a day. And then they just said right away, yes. And which means, oh shit, they said yes right away. That's not good. So So next time you say 500, and if they say yes right away, then oh shit, I'm gonna say 700 next time. Then you just have to like go with the flow as well with your clients, and always understand that probably you will be getting less than they can probably do, and a lot of times you'll be robbed. But I don't think people should think that it's being robbed. It's almost like if the money is enough for you to live, have a comfortable life, and also invest, then it's enough. You don't have to be greedy about it as well. You know what I mean? Like, if it's enough for you to have a good life and still evolve as an artist, then, there's no point of you trying to get more or trying to be a hardball on that, as well. So that's kind of my main advice for people starting and also people working in the industry now. It's not really advice. It's what you say all the time on your podcast and emails as well.
That's great, man. So, well, now it's coming from you. It actually means something. No, that's good. I think that's really critical. It's also too like I said before, everything's a learning experience. So I think the more that you kind of take note of hey, I said this and then they said this, the more that you feel like, okay, next time I'll try this. And it's also too if you're happy with those numbers, then that's all that matters,
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, but I think that's really cool. I think it's just important to, you also got to think about do I need any downtime, or what if they come back with revisions, and
exactly.
How do I kind of tally that into? But yeah, a lot of times companies, they might be working on something big, but they got the project because they underbid, and so it kind of ripples through to you as well. But I think the key thing is to be comfortable walking away, rather than if you know your numbers and they come back, they're like, well, we want it for this much. There's been projects where someone's come to me, they're like, how much to do this? And I've said 20 grand or something, and then they basically are like, that's too much. And it's like, yeah, you could probably get someone really cheap to do that, and they'll probably charge a lot less. But for me to do it, and I'm not saying because I'm amazing, it's just I'm going to charge that because I can do another job instead for that much. So those are my numbers, and if you don't want to do it, that's fine.
But that's a frank discussion. That's a frank discussion you have to have with your client. And again, having the courage to walk away, because maybe it's not going to be a fit for you. If they want something cheaper, their expectation also will be lower, and then you're going to be upset because you're going to deliver something subpar. And then,
Mhm.
yeah, you got in some money, but then you did something you don't even like, or you're not even proud of, and you're not even going to put it on your reel. You don't really believe on it as well. So then it becomes it's almost like you're not paired up. It's not the correct client for you, almost.
Mhm.
I think also that fits into this conversation for sure.
That drives me nuts when I'll work with artists and like halfway through the job, they'll start saying like, "Oh, I'm not being paid enough," and
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff, and they get all jaded, and it just kind of like drives me nuts because like that's the sort of stuff that just brings like, especially they're saying it to the entire room, like that brings morale down for everyone. And the thing is, like, that's your fault. Like, if you're not happy with what you're being paid, then ask for more money. But for you to then accept, like, agree to terms and then later be like,
Yeah.
they're ripping me off and they're the enemy, it's like, well, wait a minute, we gave you what you asked for and now you're upset that you should have gotten more. That's the kind of stuff that drives me nuts, because it's like, if you're not happy, do the job that you agreed to do, but then renegotiate afterwards. Say, hey, you saw the performance I did on the last job and I did all this amazing stuff. And, next time around, I feel like I'm worth this. Do you agree? And if you've done a
Yeah.
great job rather than complaining the whole time, then they're going to say,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And renegotiate.
But I think that comes back again to the fact that people sometimes forget to actually double check how much money is worth for them. Because I sometimes think that people see these figures, they see, oh, someone is earning, I don't know how many thousands per day. Oh, someone is earning 700.
Yeah.
They're getting so much money and I'm getting so little. But they just need, like, sometimes you need to understand that first, it might be fake. It might be fake news. It might not even be true. The other part of it as well, it might have to do with the experience of the person or the context of the person, or the person is maybe, like 30 years experience or something, or brings a lot to the table, or is doing something else. So it's not really comparable. But the other thing, I keep going back to that, you need to understand how much you need for you. And I think sometimes we suffer from understanding that we are in a very privileged job, super privileged. We are getting paid to do something we love, that we enjoy, and that we like, highly technical, highly technological. Almost very few people can even do this job. It's almost like rocket science. It's very complicated, although it's simple for us, but for most people, it's rocket science, And sometimes we forget that we are on a very privileged situation of being working on something we love and still get very well paid. Even if you're not getting as much as you think you should be getting, you're still getting really well paid. If we start thinking about, like, if you're getting, even if you're a junior, and if you're already getting, like, let it put it in perspective, people that work on a supermarket or work on a coffee shop here in Britain, they are earning like, 15,000, 13,000 a year, or 70, maybe they're lucky to get 17,000 a year. Imagine that if you think about it, where a VFX artist is probably getting that in 3 months, or in 4 months. And so I'm not saying, it's not your fault, of course, that someone else, like, it has to do with a lot of different things on your life that happen, that someone is doing one job or another. But we are very fortunate, and I feel blessed every day. And I guess maybe I feel like that because, I come from a poor background, and I was in Portugal, and I was not rich. I had no money. I had to count all my little cents, So I really look at money in a way like, shit, man, I'm so fortunate. At least I have it, and at least I have a job and I do what I like. So I never really get that jaded when I hear, oh shit, I could have gotten double that, or I could have gotten 3 times that, or I got enough. I got what I needed, and I think it was worth what I got. I think as long as you feel like that, you're good. You're good with yourself.
It's kind of like Instagram. People will go on and look at someone who, it's kind of what you were saying, that could be fake news, but they're looking at like all the stacks of cash and the private jet and all this fake stuff, or they're comparing their body type to someone else's. Or something I found a lot with artists is that they'll go on and they'll see other artists who are doing amazing work. And I feel like there's 2 categories of that. There's people get inspired and people get intimidated, but a lot of people get intimidated. They'll see someone better, instead of saying, wow, like, that's so cool, like, I love what they did and that inspires me. It's like, oh, I'm never going to be that good. And that, I think, can be really poisonous to have. But it's also, if you see someone else earning more money or whatever else, you're like, well, I want that, and
exactly.
Yourself. And a lot of times, like, you've got to earn it. Like, I'll just quickly say that, like, I did a job in New Orleans, like some movie years ago, and I flew down there because I was dating a girl. Yeah, this is a long time ago now, but I was dating a girl at the time, and who was at that company. I was just like, yeah, I'll get paid to just spend some time down there. It'll be fun. And I just remember going to lunch with a lot of the artists, and just everyone's like complaining about, like, oh, I heard so and so is making this much money, and you know, if they just got rid of this person, then we could all get a raise. And it was just very obvious to me, like, I'm sitting at the wrong table. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because this is the kind of stuff that I would do at 18 years old or whatever it would be.
Yeah.
You know, this kind of stuff that isn't healthy. It isn't like beneficial to anyone, and it's kind of, I hate to say it, like amateur talk, in the sense that, like, just don't stop worrying about everyone else and how operations are managing, you know, in the company, because like it's easy to judge everyone else when you have no idea what's going on.
Exactly. Especially on a big company where there's a lot of political things happening. A lot of people have other views, and especially the perspectives. Like, some people on the company might know so much more than you in terms of what's going on in financials, and also who's getting what and who has stake on it, who has stock. And yeah, I felt that a lot when I was working in big companies, especially in companies like the Mill, like where there was a lot of political stuff. And as the more I went up, you know, I became a head of department, and I started going to the meetings of heads of departments, and then started going to the meetings with the financial directors. And it was funny because I love visual effects so much, and I ended up like starting this is just an aside, but started having meetings about the aircon of the company, or about the seats, or about, you know, stuff that I really don't want to talk about. But you know, we moved to a new building, and I really remember being all the heads of the department be on a room trying to calculate how many air conditions we should have on each floor. And I'm like, shit, man, this reached the point where I'm not talking about VFX anymore. But yeah, you know, those kind of things are important. Everything is important on a big company, especially a company that has a huge building in the middle of London. Anyway, as just like you said, people should always remember why they came, like, why are they here, and why are they doing this. And I think every day I always, man, I still have my video camera up there on the shelf, you know, like, of course it's shit, I'm never going to use it, but I'm still always looking at it and thinking, shit, man, my mother, and she gave it to me, you know, she I don't remember how much it was, but it was a fucking fortune. It was a fortune back then. This is the 80s, you know, like early 90s. So, and I always look at it and think, man, she did a lot of work for me to get that camera. I should be very blessed. I've always loved cinema. I always loved visual effects. I work on this every day, you know. Man, I was on set yesterday. I was on set directing a mocap shoot for a cinematic trailer of a game that I've always played when I was a young guy. And I'm directing a cinematic for it. And I'm thinking, shit, man, how did I even get here? Like, I don't even know how I got here. And I'm so blessed. And I'm looking at that camera thinking it all started there. And I'm happy I'm getting, who cares if I'm getting 700, 800, or 750, or 725, or 715? I don't care. I'm having fun. I'm getting enough. I have enough money. I can live. I have food. Right. You know, I think people forget, like, we are artists. I think people forget that we are artists. We love what we do, and sometimes it's not that important. You know, it's not like if you're getting $10 less, who cares? You know, I don't want to. I want to sound like it's not important. Of course it is. You should get paid as much as you should get paid. You know,
what you're worth, but at the same time, as stepping stones, you can say, okay, well, I aspire in the next couple of months to try and get that extra $10 an hour or whatever it is that I'm trying to earn.
And if you feel like you didn't get enough money and you're having financial problems, then of course you are not getting paid enough. Of course, because working in the visual effects industry, and if you're having financial problems, then there's certain something going wrong, because. I'm not saying that every one of us earns a lot of money, but if you're a good artist, if you have good talent, and if you're good at what you do, it tends to me that you can get work. It's not difficult to get work if you're good. If you're bad, of course, that's a different story, and that then you need to work on that, and you need to get better, and you need to learn more, or maybe even find out that it's probably not for you. Maybe it's not for you. You know, maybe there's some other job that you can do. There's a lot of artists that I've met that became producers, or became something else, or became on set, or there's other things that you can still be on this world industry and do other things, and maybe you're better at those things than what you're trying to do. I'll never forget that one of the best producers of the mill was a modeling artist at the mill, and he did the right choice. He thought about himself like, oh, I'm never going to be very good at 3D. I love it, but I can't really do much of it. But he became really good at production, and he's still involved, in visual effects, and he still has the credit, and he's still there. He's still working on it.
It's all stepping stones. I mean, you've identified the industry you want to work in, and now it's about finding your placement. So you might try some things. Like I used to animate characters. I was doing a lot of different stuff, and you eventually find like, hey, I really enjoy this area, so that's what I'm going to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, something I was going to say earlier. I'm
Sorry
spacing on it now. But,
I talked too much.
No,
Sorry. You see, you finally found someone that talks just as much as you.
Nobody. I talk more than everyone. One thing, just going back to money though, it's funny because when you're talking about pricing, air conditioning costs and all the other overhead, it's funny because when you're trying to figure out how much to charge yourself, like you've got to think of that air conditioner in your apartment and everything else. So it's
electricity, internet, everything. Even if the internet is only $10, it doesn't matter. It's $10. You have to pay. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. People forget that, like they forget all those things, I think, especially now. I guess most people are working from home, and that is a problem. Like people are now spending a lot more money on their house with internet, with heating, with internet, with electricity, with gas, even the functioning of the house itself, the computer wear and tear, the monitor that they need to buy, like all those things are costs that happen. And you need to just find a way of calculating that. Just put it on a spreadsheet. Try to calculate how much it costs per month. Try to break it down, like, okay, how much do I need? How much is my bill usually of electricity? How much is my bill of phone, and how much is the average? Just put it on a spreadsheet. Once you see all the numbers together, you start really having an idea of what's going on every month, and you start, oh shit, I actually have 1,000 pounds on this or 2,000 pounds on that, and which is really important.
Good for perspective too. And you just reminded me of what the heck I was going to say, which was exactly that I think that also when it comes to money, it's about, before you start thinking I'm not being paid enough and everything else, I think it's best to start internally and look at, well, why is that? Like, is there something on my end before blaming everyone else that I need more money right now because I'm going broke? Is to figure out like, well, maybe I'm not budgeting myself correctly, because that's one thing that I've found is usually the problem, is that most people, they want more money, but the problem is if they get more money, they're just going to spend more money. It's a leaking ship. Yeah. And you've got to fix those leaks before you can start thinking about everything else. So I always say the quickest way to get a pay rise is to actually do a budget on yourself and figure out like, wow, I'm blowing all this cash on all this different stuff. And if I were just to fix those leaks, then I'm going to save 10, 20 grand a year. There's my pay rise before I start trying to get more money in. Yeah, so, because again, like the more money comes in, the more leaks that you're going to identify if you're, not taking care of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad you're saying that. I'm really glad to say that.
That's cool, man. There's 1,000 things I'd love to talk about. I guess we're at the hour, but I'd love to have you back and we can nerd out more about the creative side as well. But this has been really fun, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I apologize that we did not nerd at all, and I'm sure your audience is a bit disappointed that we didn't really talk about artistic sides and also about softwares and this and that. But I feel like this, what we just discussed, is actually very important. And I have never talked about this on a podcast. I have never talked about these kind of things. No one ever asked me about any of that ever on any podcast or any interview or anything that I've done. And I really feel like people ask those things all the time to me. Like my students ask me, how do I charge? How do I do a contract? How do that? There's almost no information out there about it, like real information. If people that are really doing it, there's like a lot of weird stuff going on, of course. But yeah, I'm glad we did this chat anyway. And although I know we didn't nerd about any software in general, but I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Well, it's cool because I spent all this time. Well, it's on the screensaver now, but plotting out like what I was going to chat about. So that's going to be chat number 2, I think. No, I honestly think having you on the podcast, I kind of figured it's probably going to end up being multiple, because I think there's plenty of stuff that we probably need to talk about. So Yeah, I'd love to have you back and do more of these, just because, again, when it comes to directing and supervising, as well as your experience at big studios, small studios, software. I was actually going to ask you earlier, did you ever use Digital Fusion 1, if you remember that, just because you were mentioning Shake and Fusion and everything else earlier. I remember that one with the big fat pipelines that connected everything. It was like so freaking ugly.
I didn't use 1, no, but I did use 2 and 3, yes. And it was similar. It was the fat pipes, and it's still a bit like that, but it's a bit less now. But it's I didn't use it for long. You know, it was almost like, I think it was just almost a year that I used Fusion. I just switched to Shake immediately because it was so much more. It was just better. It was just like a better software. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and again, in terms of like what we've talked about, like, I think it's really, you know, there's the creative side, but like what we've been talking about is more just experience. It's not one thing or another. It's literally like what you learn from going through this industry. It's these are the critical things that we all need to think about. So this has been awesome, man. And you've got a huge YouTube channel. Where can people, like, I'll link to everything, but where can people go to find out more about you?
Yeah, well, I mean, everything kind of comes together on my YouTube channel for sure. Like, it's Hugo's Desk. Just type Hugo's Desk on YouTube, or just put YouTube/Hugo's Desk. You'll find it there. I have 2 YouTube channels now because people were complaining that I was putting my full streams on my regular channel. So I've made a channel just for the VODs from Twitch. So I have Hugo's Desk Live, which only has the complete replays of Twitch, you know, like 3-hour, 4-hour long streams. They're unedited. They're just like there if anyone wants to watch them. They often have just chatting, Q&A, software, workshop. I don't know. We talk about something. Sometimes they come in on Zoom, some of my students and colleagues. We talk and chat. It's always a stream. We never know where it goes. But yeah, it's Hugo's Desk on YouTube, Hugo's Desk Live on YouTube. Then, you know, Hugo's Desk everywhere else, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Obviously, I have my Twitter as well, which is Hugo C. Guerra. That's it, really. Like, yeah, I kind of live on YouTube these days.
That's awesome, man. And this has been really great. So again, I appreciate it, man. And thanks again for everything.
No problem. Thanks so much, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Hugo's Desk is fan-funded and only possible by the generosity and support of my Patreons, Twitch subscribers, and YouTube members. If you like my videos, please consider supporting my channel on Patreon or becoming a member on YouTube.